What's up, elasmites, and welcome back to the podcast that encourages you to embrace your uniqueness. Because today, I, your host, Sam McNeely, have a one-of-a-kind episode for you that goes into animal personalities. But first, let's babble. Thank you, returning listeners, and welcome new, soon-to-be shark lovers. Be sure to check out our previous episodes for more fun and informative conversations on these lovable animals with lovable people. And a big thanks to those Patreon donors who make this show possible by giving at patreon.com/elasmospod. If you're thinking about supporting me and my ventures, please check out that Patreon page to see what additional benefits you can receive by becoming an elasmite donor. Just a hint, we've got some really cool stuff for you, so go check that out. Thank you so much, and again, that's patreon.com/elasmospod. And thanks to all of you who rate and review this podcast. And remember, if you rate and review this podcast on whatever platform you're listening to it on, and send that rating and review to me at elasmospod@gmail.com, you'll be entered into a raffle to win a prize from our episode 1 guests. And if you share this podcast on social media, you'll get 2 extra entries into the drawing. So rate, review, share on social media, and email me at elasmospod@gmail.com. You can find the Elasmos Podcast on Instagram and Twitter at elasmospod. And our Facebook page is the Elasmos Podcast, A Shark's Universe. Our YouTube channel is officially up and running. It is also called the Elasmos Podcast, A Shark's Universe. Our website is elasmospod.com, where you can find links to all of these things. So be sure to go check that out as well. And lastly, don't forget to share your listeners' adventure stories with me to encourage ecotourism and nature exploration by emailing them to me at elasmospod@gmail.com. And at last, our episode this week. Whew, it's a good one, y'all. Trust me. Our international guest this week is from France, but currently works out of Berlin, Germany as a behavioral ecologist. She very recently earned her PhD from Humboldt University of Berlin, but that was through her work at the Bimini Biological Field Station. And yes, that's the exact same shark lab that episode 5 guest Matt Smuckle is from. So get excited because we're running through that entire lab and getting everybody on board. Matt actually brought up this guest in his episode, so this week's guest kind of made a pre-cameo in Matt's episode. But in today's episode, we talked about accidental shark encounters, animal personalities, nature versus nurture, or both, or neither, spiders and sea anemones, shark introverts and extroverts, and changing personalities. So hop on the boat real quick because we're about to go for a ride with behavioral ecologist, Dr. Félicie Dhellemmes. This is episode 7.
My name is Félicie Dhellemmes.
Okay, that's part of your name, isn't it though? Because didn't you just get your PhD?
Just 3 weeks ago, I became Dr. Félicie Dhellemmes.
That's so exciting. Congratulations. That's gonna feel so good.
Thank you. Yeah, very cool.
Is it weird to get used to? Have you had anyone call you Dr. Dhellemmes yet?
No, and actually, technically, I still need a last step until I can officially write everywhere on my door that I'm Dr. Dhellemmes. I need to send my final thesis to my university, which is a bit of a problem because I've published a lot of papers in journals, and journals have policies for copyright, I guess. And so they're not too keen on me sending this thing. So right now I'm kind of trying to convince everyone that, please, can I send my stuff and be done?
Yeah, exactly. That's the last step until you're done. And so where are you from?
I'm originally from the north of France in a city called Lille. So really far away from the ocean. I didn't grow up near the ocean or being that interested in it, actually.
Oh, huh. Funny you made your way to sharks then. And so you're in Berlin right now, right?
Yeah, I live in Berlin, Germany. I'm in a research group that does water ecology, and we work mostly in Germany, but also all over the world. So that's why I did some shark research in the Bahamas and some billfish research in Mexico. Now I'm working on pike in the Baltic Sea, so we move a lot. But base is in Berlin.
Nice. I went to Berlin a few years ago for a trip, and I absolutely loved it.
It's cool, eh?
Yeah, it really is. Both literally and figuratively. It was freezing when we went. That was probably one of the coldest places I'd ever been. But granted, I am from North Carolina, and we're a pretty temperate climate, so... So what got you interested in science in the first place?
I really wasn't, to start with. Just, I never considered it as a career path. I wanted to be a vet, and then I miserably failed at the entry exam to vet school. So instead I got into an engineering school. And I was kind of in this, it was agricultural engineering, and I kind of had it in my head that I needed to use this school to find a way to feed the world and solve world hunger. And I was really into animal breeding and really into aquaculture at this point. I kind of decided that Africa needed more tilapia and whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the very end of this master's in engineering, there's two things that happened. The first was that I was asked if I wanted to do a semester abroad, which I said yes, of course.
Of course.
And and one of the semesters abroad was in a marine biology master's degree. And I was like, well, whatever. It was in Mexico. It was going to be warm. There were going to be palm trees.
Oh.
It was going to be a good time. There was going to be tequila. I was like, sure, I'm in.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I went to do this thing, and that was kind of my first step into science. At that point, I met a researcher completely, like, by chance. I was just swimming in a bay, not really realizing that I was swimming in a bay where whale sharks were aggregating. So I stumbled onto a whale shark, first shark in my life.
Shit.
Like, horrible. I was terrified. And this researcher comes and yells at me because it's actually a protected area and I'm not supposed to be there, but I wasn't really good in Spanish, so I hadn't understood and whatever. And he takes me on his boat.
Oh.
And then I end up helping him for the rest of the day. I end up like boating around with him and counting the sharks and whatever else. And then at the end of the day, he's like, oh, well, you work pretty well. Could you work for me for 6 months as you do your little master's degree? I'm like, sure, like that sounds super cool. And that was kind of...
Are you kidding me?
How I completely by chance got into it.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, that was... I mean, I'm just a super, super lucky person. I never tried to be in this field. So whenever I see people struggling to get into it, I'm like, fuck, I'm so sorry because this was not the plan. But yeah, so this thing happened. And then a year later, I guess, I was looking into doing, my master thesis. And I was still kind of caught up on the whole aquaculture thing. And I wanted to do a master's in aquaculture and no one was hiring me. I tried for, I don't know, like I must not have had a good CV or what, I don't know. No one was hiring me, and then I was really in trouble because I couldn't find, or people were hiring me that I didn't want to work for, things didn't work out. And then my flatmate was watching TV and saw the Bimini Shark Lab on TV. And she was like, wow, Félicie, I could totally see you do that. And so I contacted them, asking them if they had a master's program. And they did. And so I went there and I ended up I've been with the Shark Lab for 7 years now. So
wow,
that was the turning point.
That's awesome. So you literally stumbled into shark research by accident. That's iconic.
Yeah. But it's very much a learn by doing kind of thing. Like I consider those two events as very big career accelerators. Meeting that one person and helping him for 6 months got me into the Shark Lab. And then once I was at the Shark Lab, this place is just fantastic. You learn absolutely everything. You're trusted with absolutely everything. And if you do well, they'll help you develop your career. So,
that's awesome.
From then on, I've worked really hard, but I've not had massive hurdles because the community then like carries you a little bit, I feel.
That's really special to have such a strong support system behind you, especially in the place that you work, like at the Shark Lab.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so.
And so you made it to the Bimini Shark Lab just through random contact almost?
So I applied the real way.
Mm-hmm.
I found out about them weirdly, and then I Googled it, and then they had an application form, and then I filled in the application, and then, yeah, they took me in.
Was that application for your master's or to be a volunteer there?
It's kind of the same thing. So to do your master's there, you must be a volunteer, and then on top of it, you get extra responsibilities and you get to do your own project.
Okay.
You first have to be selected to be a volunteer. Once you're selected to be a volunteer, you will have said at the beginning, oh, I'm interested in doing a project. And then they'll say, okay, we think you have the potential to do a project. What would you like to do? And then they'll discuss it with you. But the first step is being accepted to be just a volunteer.
Oh, okay, I gotcha. And so what was your master's work on?
So I'm a behavioral ecologist, so I'm not actually a marine biologist or a shark scientist or anything. I'm interested in, what animals do and why they do it.
This study area of research fascinates me. It utterly fascinates me. And if I am to go into research someday, if that's just what my calling is, what I'm meant to do, I believe that I'm meant to do behavioral ecology. It's so fascinating looking at different animals' behaviors. Oh, okay, I could talk about this forever, so let's go back to Félicie. Oh, I mean, Dr. Félicie.
And I've been studying something that's called animal personality, which is just what it sounds like. It's just the fact that within a population, different animals will behave differently, and that has nothing to do with the fact that they have different sexes or different sizes or different blah, blah, blah. It's just they have something in them that makes them behave differently. And so this whole field of animal personality has developed very much in captivity because you need to see an animal and look at it for such a long time in order to look at their personality. And you need very large sample size. So it's super easy to do on, lab mice, but it's really hard to do that on elephants.
Yeah.
And so there was a really big knowledge gap 10 years ago when I started, and we wanted to try doing that in sharks. And that's what I worked on for my master's.
That's so cool.
And it worked out pretty well, so I ended up doing a PhD about that.
Oh man, so your PhD was also on behavioral ecology of sharks.
Yeah.
So how did you end up finding your PhD advisor? Was it someone through the Bimini Shark Lab or through somewhere else?
Yeah, it was actually really easy because, so when I started at the Bimini Shark Lab doing my master's, I was supervised by a guy who was doing his PhD on shark personality. He's like the pioneer of it. His name is Dr. Jean-Sébastien Finger, and he's the one who started it all. And he was supervised by a guy. And so when I wanted to do my PhD, I went to Berlin, knocked on that guy's door. I was like, hello, can I do a PhD? He said yes. So yeah.
The old-fashioned way.
Yeah. He had obviously heard of me, but...
Yeah, and just knocking on someone's door is sometimes just the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, and so I have a stupid question, but I have no shame. What is personality?
Personality describes the fact that within a population, animals are consistently different.
Okay.
And so if you were to think about it for a human, it's if I go to a party tomorrow and I'm really shy, then if I go in a party in a month, I'm still going to be really shy, and I go to another party in 2 months, I'm going to be really shy because I am just a shy person. And so with statistical methods, we're able to quantify this kind of stuff for animals.
So how is personality distinguished from behavior? Or does personality drive behavior?
Behavior is kind of what you do, right? And there is a part in what you do that is due to you being an individual.
Right.
So imagine all of the things you could be doing all of the spectrums of behaviors you could do, and some part of it is due to your genetics. It's due to, the way you're built by genes. And then another part of this is due to the way you're educated.
Oh.
It's due to your background. And then there's a little part of this that doesn't actually have a very well-known origin. We don't really know what personality is made of, but it's just a little quirk that makes you behave differently. So what we say in statistical term is that personality is a little part of the behavioral variance. It's like if you were to quantify behavior and you'd make a big graph of it, you'd have parts of it that is due to different stuff, basically.
I gotcha.
And there is a part of it that is due to this unknown thing that is just inherent to people. And in fact, it's actually really interesting because a friend of mine did an experiment where they had clones, fish that had the same genetics, and they were raised in the same tanks, and they still had personalities. So there's really something that's happening, and there's a part of behavior that makes everyone unique, and that's what personality is.
That's insane. It's really just crazy how different we all are, and especially looking at those cloned fish examples, I mean, that's unbelievable how they're literally the exact same, but they're still different. And it's wild we haven't figured it out yet, that it's still a mystery.
Yeah, this is very much a big topic, is how does personality develop, what is the background that makes us all so different, regardless of our genes and our backgrounds, etc.
Right, it seems like there's so much that could go into it. It's really cool and such a new area of study, it sounds like we just don't know that much about it. And has personality been observed in other fish species that might suggest sharks also have personalities?
Yeah, personality has been described in almost everything.
Really?
I mean, spiders and cockroaches and sea anemones.
Wow, I just can't believe this. So I just went down multiple rabbit holes. First, sea anemones do have personalities, which is amazing because they have one of the most simple nervous systems in the animal kingdom. Because, I mean, they're essentially just a blob of jelly with flailing inflatable arms like those things at car dealerships. But researchers found that these little fellows had personalities by squirting water right in the middle of that circle where their mouth is, which causes all those little arms to curl in and kind of shrink up and get withdrawn. And then they timed how long it took each anemone to open their arms back up. And it was different depending on each individual, which is just stupid cool, because these things are literally nothing but jelly, a mouth/anus, a manus, and a gut. And then I looked up cockroach personalities, and they also have personalities. There's a paper on that too, and just how they're explorative and how the personalities change or remain the same over time and through different life stages. It's just wild. I looked up the spider one, and that was a completely different rabbit hole, because apparently the researcher that did personality work on spiders was caught for fabricating data. So this researcher, I'm not going to name names, you can look it up if you want, just duplicated the data that he had for one spider for multiple spiders so that he could get results to get more grants, so more money for him and better notoriety. But he got caught, like the liar he is. But to be fair, if sea anemones have personalities, I'm going to guess spiders do too. And I do want to emphasize that this was just one guy that carried out this scandal, and it doesn't invalidate all the great work that's been carried out by other researchers on this topic, including some of his own collaborators, which is really unfortunate because they had no idea, and now they're stuck in this nightmare of a situation that they're trying to all sort out and figure out just how all this started. It's really just a mess, and it's just this one person that's to blame. But yeah, why can't people just be honest? Use that brain of yours that you were given. Just think a little bit. Just a teeny bit. And you'll be good. And don't worry, I've got you covered. I'll put links to the sea anemone paper and the cockroach paper in the show notes. Because who doesn't love reading about cockroaches on their free time? It doesn't make me nauseous, that's for sure.
basically, ever since people have started like interesting themselves in this, there was a huge part. It was maybe like 10, 20 years ago. People just like were like, oh, I'm going to try it on this. I'm going to try it on that. And then turns out that everything, like every animal has a personality. I would bet on it, I'm sure. Everything that behaves has a difference in behavior. So there was not really a big mystery. We were expecting to find it in sharks. The big mystery was, how are we going to quantify it? That's really hard because you need to like develop tests that gives you good confidence that you're actually looking at this little part of behavior. And then what does it mean? So, you know, now we know that everything has a personality. The next step is, so what? Why does that matter? Why would we even care? And so the big questions are, could this help us conserve animals better? Could this help us, you know, understand fisheries better? Could this help us, you know, there's a bunch of, could this help us do aquaculture better? All of this kind of stuff. And so, because we've done almost nothing in the wild, we don't actually understand how animal personality influences ecosystems. And this is what my PhD was about, was to try to do it in a wild animal and then release the animal and look at what happens. What do they eat? Where do they go? Are they more likely to die? Are they not as likely to die? Etc., etc., etc. And that was, the basis of it.
Yeah, it sounds a lot easier to measure behavior or to watch behavior in captivity where they're basically just in a glass box for you to observe them. But how did you do it in the wild?
So we did not measure personality in the wild. That's the cool part, is that we took the individuals in captivity, measured their personality, tagged them, released them, and then observed what they were doing in the wild.
Oh.
Tests in the wild are really difficult because, and I'm going to give you an example of what personality could be. Personality could be how willing you are to explore new places. Mm-hmm. Exploring new places can be really rewarding because you could find new sources of food. If you're a shark, you could find mates, you could find a whole bunch of stuff. But it comes at a cost because you might encounter new predators, you might not find food and then run out of energy and die of starvation, etc. So basically there's kind of like, you explore but you're kind of taking a risk, or you don't explore a lot. And that's one personality type that we're interested in. If you're exploring, so think about yourself. If you're super hungry, are you going to explore? Sure, you're going to explore, try to find a McDonald's. If you're not hungry, why would you go explore? Right?
Yeah, makes sense.
So there's this big problem in the wild that we don't know if the animal's hungry or not. We don't know if they're stressed or not. We don't know if they've recently encountered the predators and they're super stressed and they're super scared, and that's why they're not exploring, etc., etc. So in the wild, it's super difficult because you need to know kind of like the background, almost mindset of an animal in order to be able to say, oh, this one is a very explorative one, because maybe it's just very explorative right now because it's super hungry.
Right.
So, and this is one of the reasons why people have been doing it so much in captivity. So what we did is we built big pens in Bimini, in the ocean. We put all the sharks in it. And in these pens, they don't have any predators and they're fed, like, they're given as much fish as they want. It's an open buffet. So
sounds like a dream place
hungry. To me. Yeah, I know. I mean, I don't know. Some of that fish is a bit stinky, to be honest. Barracuda. But yeah, so they're not hungry. They're not stressed. They're kind of used to where they are because we let them kind of chill out, etc. And then we test their personalities, and we know that nothing that we're looking at is due to them being stressed or hungry or whatever else.
Okay, so that's how you eliminate all those variables.
Yeah, that's how you control for those things.
Félicie and other scientists we've had on the show may sound a little bit power hungry when they say control for this and control for that. But really, they're just being good scientists. Controls are the basis for science. They're what you compare something else to. So controls are used to figure out whether differences are noticed between two different treatments within an experiment. And I know that's a lot of mumbo-jumbo jargon, but treatments are just different variables being tested against each other within a single experiment to figure out where differences occur. So for example, you're in a frozen yogurt bar. You love to put all the toppings on, like just pile them onto your ice cream, and you know it tastes good. But what makes it taste good? Is it the crumbles of Oreo? Is it the Reese's Cup crumbles? Is it the pieces of waffle cone or the chocolate chips? Controls are like just that ice cream, just that frozen yogurt. And the treatments would be adding one variable at a time. So one treatment would be the ice cream with the Oreo crumbles, another treatment would be the ice cream with the chocolate chips, and so on and so forth. And then by doing a taste test on all those, you can tell which ones make the ice cream taste better. Hint, it's all of them. All of them combined make a much better flavor, and that's how I do my frozen yogurt. And that's how everyone should do their frozen yogurt. So if you're like me and your mouth is watering, let's get some ice cream and finish this episode. Alright, back to Félicie telling us how she tested for shark personality. Here she is.
The test that we've used the most, that's been the most successful one that Dr. Finger has developed, is a novel open field test. And that's actually used in a lot of animals, where you just put an animal into a new place it's never seen. And you just look at how much how do they travel in it? Do some of them go, quicker to the end of it, or do some, stay closer to where you've introduced them to the environment? Do some explore faster than others? So that's how we do it.
Oh, so it's basically like an exploration test.
Yeah.
That's so fascinating. And so is this used as a predictor for how they'll behave in the wild? Whether they're more explorative or more shy or hesitant?
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of theories. Very smart people have met years ago and have said, okay, if some individuals are more likely to explore a lot, they should grow faster because they will find more food, right? But they also should die at an earlier age because they're going to be taking so many risks that they're just going to get eaten. But if they make it to adulthood, they will make it to adulthood faster because they've grown faster, and therefore, there's a bunch of theories put behind that, and my goal during my PhD was to test whether those theories were true.
Oh.
So I took all of the sharks in captivity, I tested their exploration, I released them, and then I was like, okay, go now. Let's see if you grow faster than your buddy. Let's see if you die faster than your buddy, etc., etc.
Ah, that's so cool. And the sharks you used were lemon sharks, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so how were you able to monitor them? Like, do they stay around the same areas for most of their life?
They'll stay around until they're 3 or 4 years old, and I've only worked on 1-year-old sharks to make sure that I could always find them, that I could really monitor them, etc.
Huh. Well, how handy. They just stay right there for you to work with. That's so fun. You kind of got your own little backyard shark pets.
Yeah.
So are you allowed to share your results yet? I know that can be confidential before it gets published.
Yeah. That was actually published last year.
Oh man, so congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. This whole story about, sharks exploring more, growing faster, and dying earlier, there's 2 ways we've looked at it. The first one is, as you said, we put trackers in the sharks, little acoustic tags, and we wanted to know. So if you look at Bimini, there's the shore, which is fringed with mangroves, and I don't know if you know that, but mangrove is a refuge for baby animals, right? So baby sharks will be able to escape their predators very well in there. It's nice and safe, it's shallow, but baby sharks eat fish, which are also really good at hiding in the mangroves. So a shark that lives really close to the mangrove is probably very safe, but probably not really good at finding food.
Oh.
A shark that goes further away offshore in the seagrass is probably much better at getting food because then the fishes can't really escape from him. But there will be black-tip sharks and big lemon sharks and bull sharks that are gonna eat it.
Right.
So what we thought is the sharks that explore the most should be found offshore, and then they should grow faster. And then the sharks that grow faster should be more likely to die. So we put trackers in the sharks, and we also had something that's called mark recapture. So every shark had a little chip, like a cat or a dog.
Mm-hmm.
And then basically the next year you go fishing. So you fish on 1 year, and then next year you go fishing. And if the shark is still there, it's alive. If it's not there, it's dead.
And how do you account for sharks that just don't feel like being caught that day that you're out fishing?
So we fish for 12 days in a row until really we can't catch anything else. And we fish using gill nets.
I hate to interrupt Félicie here, but real quick, gill nets are just these big mesh nets that have a lead weight on one end and floats on the other end. And so they basically, when they're deployed, sit in the water column and act as a wall, and then fish swim into the gill net mesh. And they're called gill nets because the fish can go into the net, but they can't really back out because then their gills get caught in the mesh. And so the net really holds them there. So it's really good for catching pretty much anything that's in its way. And it's honestly a big problem within fisheries because of all the bycatch that it can get. But it's helpful for studies like this when you're needing to catch everything and see what's around in the water. And because these nets just sit in the water and wait for fish to swim into them, they don't need to be baited, so they don't select for just the hungry fish that are looking to take a bite on your hook.
So we fish for 12 days in a row until really we can't catch anything else. And we fish using gill nets, so it's not like we only catch the hungry sharks. Any shark that's swimming around just gets caught, and then little by little, as the days go on, the first day you'll catch 50 sharks, and then 30, and then 20, and then on, because there's less and less in the population. And we know that they won't leave until they're 3 years old, so we can with a lot of certainty say, okay, this shark's probably dead. There's of course some errors, but it's not enough for our results to be false.
Yeah, I gotcha. That's amazing they stick around that area so long. I mean, it clearly must be a really good nursery for them to grow up in.
Yeah, it's good for them. And so we did this in 2 different populations. One of them had a lot of predators, and one of them had like very little predators. And what we found is that in the population with very few predators, sharks that explore most are further from shore, grow faster, and die earlier. So exactly what we predicted, exactly what everyone in the world had been saying for so long.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
But in the population where there were so many predators, sharks that explored the most were still, like every shark was close to the mangrove, probably because there were so many predators that it was just not worth it for any of them to go out there and eat. And then some sharks were growing faster than others, but that had nothing to do with whether or not they explored a lot.
Oh, surprise.
So basically, the growth was dependent on another behavior that we haven't quantified. There's something else that's helping them grow, and that's not the fact that they explore.
Okay,
and then the fast-growing sharks were still dying a bit earlier, and this we don't really know why. But that's interesting because if you think about it, all of those sharks we took in captivity, and we know that some of those sharks are more explorative. They should be exploring because we've quantified it in a test that had no predators. They had all the food they wanted, and they still explored more. And somehow there's kind of a threshold, right? It's like if you go into a bank and you're a very outgoing person and suddenly someone puts a gun to your head and is like, give me your money, you're probably not outgoing anymore.
Yeah, probably
right?
not.
You're going to be all shy and you're going to be all careful. Well, sharks do the same, I think. All of those sharks that are explorative, the moment there's too many predators, they're like, okay, never mind, I'm not explorative anymore. And they're able to adjust. They're able to adjust their behavior, basically.
That's amazing. And how did their explorative or non-explorative personality relate to growth again?
Some sharks grew faster than others, but that had nothing to do. So some non-explorative sharks were growing fast, some very explorative sharks were growing fast. So that tells me that there's something else than exploration that helps sharks grow fast. And we don't know what that is. We haven't quantified
a mystery. That's cool.
Maybe it's how, I don't know, maybe it's how flexible they are. And They can snatch we don't know what it is.
That makes me wonder how genetically related that is. Like kind of that nature versus nurture debate through personality, but then also incorporating how growth factors into that, which it might not. But it's just really interesting to think about, especially since it's such a mystery. And how did you choose lemon sharks to be the focus of your experiments?
So, of course, it was easy because I was at the Bimini Shark Lab, and that's their model species. Now, I really think that out of all the shark species, this is the best choice.
Really? How so?
Yeah, because, they're sharks that you can put in the wild, and when you put them in the wild, they're not going to leave. I told you they don't leave until they're 3 years old, so if you know where to find a shark, you know where to find him again in a month or 2 months or 3 months. Mm-hmm. So it's easy to monitor them. It's not, you're not looking for them. It's not like a needle in a haystack. You know about where they're going to be and you can try to find them again.
Gotcha.
They can be kept in captivity and do those tests in captivity, which was a huge part of my work. Mm. And I'm pretty sure that they are the most studied shark out there.
Really?
Simply because the Shark Lab has been doing work on them for over 30 years. And for me, it's been really helpful to have all of those papers from previous people to say, well, I don't have to take care of that because we already know. Mm. We know how fast they grow. We know how likely they are to die. We know that we can capture 100% of the population in 12 days. We know this. We know that. So, you can just focus on what you want to know. You don't have to deal with all of the other gray areas, I think.
Man, that's awesome that you had research already behind you that you could take care of those gray areas. I mean, that you didn't have to do little side experiments to figure out those weird nuances within lemon sharks and how they interact with each other and the environment and everything. And now I was wondering, since you worked with juveniles, did hormone levels have any kind of effect on personality or shape personality in any way? Or vice versa, did personality guide that boat and affect hormone levels or development rate?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know if personality guides that boat, but that boat definitely guides personality. So we know, for example, that newborns don't have a personality yet. One day they'll explore a lot, and then the next day they're not going to be exploring just because they haven't really gained. They don't really have the experience to have a personality. You can't be scared or anything if you've never been scared of anything,
Yeah, that makes sense.
So personality is something that kind of develops over the first few weeks or months of the life of an individual, we think. Mm-hmm. We don't actually know that. But there's research at the moment to understand like how and how fast and what are the mechanisms that make personality appear. And then, of course, we're looking at sharks that are 1 year old. They're going to be mature at 14 years old. These 14 years in between that where they can be experiencing a bunch of stuff. And we know from other animals that, for example, traumatic things changes personality. And of course, you can think of it for a human. Mm-hmm. The example that I have in mind is actually a funny one that I've heard at a conference one. And I can't remember what insects they did it on, but they had an insect that they sexually harassed somehow. I can't actually remember how they sexually harassed the insect. Oh my God. I think they pinched it on the abdomen or something, which is what the males do when they're harassing the females. And then the females would completely flip their personalities.
What?
As a result of repeated harassment. So
no way.
And you could imagine that in a woman as well, right?
Yeah, really.
This makes total sense. And then when an animal gets to maturity, of course, as you said, the hormones kicked in. And what happens when that happens, I don't know.
If my fascination with animal behavior and personality wasn't obvious enough before, my multi-hour deep dive into the psychological rabbit hole of personality development should be pretty telling. Don't worry, I won't take that long, not just because we're here to learn from Félicie, but also because I don't understand it all. Basically, what I've gathered is that personality is plastic. It can always change, and though the change may be slow, it can still happen. Personality seems to be influenced by genetics, experiences, and the environment that you live in or grow up in. And because there's so many variables influencing personality, it makes it really hard to understand how it develops. There are lots of theories suggested by Sigmund Freud and other psychologists, but I will happily let y'all explore that if you want to on your own. It's a lot to wrap your brain around, so I'm not going to make a fool out of myself trying to explain psychology. Well, I guess at least not yet. Maybe in future episodes.
I think, of course, the personality that they have as babies are not going to be the same as adults, but I still think that it provides the baseline to what it's going to be as adults.
Okay.
Who we were as children is not the same as adults, but is a big part of who we are as adults. It's probably the same for animals.
But inside, we are same. Same, but different, but still same.
Yeah, it forms a path, but it can still change.
Yeah, I guess it tells the stone on what side of the mountain it's going to roll, you know?
Oh, yeah, I like that analogy.
You tumble in a particular direction, and this direction is probably influenced by what direction you're going to as a kid.
Yeah.
And then if you have a traumatism, like a big stone in the middle of the path, then you'll go another way, but yeah.
Yeah. And I guess that shows the plasticity of personalities. I mean, even in the last probably 5 years, I've been able to tell drastic changes in my own personality. And that's me looking at myself, so I can only imagine what other people think of me. But so, were there any other personalities that you were looking for? Like you mentioned, you were focused mostly on either explorative or non-explorative. Were you looking at any other personalities? Or was that just an easy way to say that yes, these sharks are different and they do exhibit traits that could be relatable to personality?
Yeah, we looked at another trait, so to give you also a broad idea, there's usually 5 things that people look at. They look at exploration, they look at boldness, and those 2 things are very similar yet different. Exploration is the willingness to go to explore novelty, and boldness is how you react to stressful situations. But it's very similar because very often a novel situation can be a stressful one.
Right.
So those 2 kind of go hand in hand. Then people look at aggressiveness. Like there's a lot of work on some wrasse species that kind of attack other fish around their nests and stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I actually don't know a lot about it because we don't study aggressivity in sharks that much. And then we look at activity, which is the baseline. It's almost kind of a metabolism. It's how hyperactive you are.
Okay, yeah.
And then the last thing that we look at is sociability. And that's one that I've been very interested in because lemon sharks are known to be social. So we wanted to know if some sharks are more social than others.
Ooh, that's really cool. Yeah, that's what I'd be interested in too. Like Félicie said, boldness and exploration are very similar, but they're still different. Boldness is associated with risk-taking, while exploration is more related to willingness to scope out new areas. And the tricky part with variables like these is that they can overlap because new areas also pose a certain level of risk since you don't know what the new area has to offer. And just as a fun side note, there are other common animal personality types that have been characterized as activity, so like whether the animal is a lazy bum or a Chris Traeger.
I absolutely think that we should keep campaigning. The worst possible thing we could do would be to stop, because if the campaign stops, we all stop. Stopping is certain death. Who went to Panini? Anyone? Everyone? I'm going to say everyone.
Then there's aggressiveness and sociability. Across the spectrum of each of these personality characteristics, there are frequent relationships between each characteristic, which are called behavioral syndromes. So for example, boldness and aggressiveness often go hand in hand. So typically, but remember, not always, an animal that is more bold is also usually more aggressive. Just think about it. We all have that one friend who is bold and says whatever they want, right? That same person is also usually blunt and upfront. I am quite the opposite. I'm more likely to keep things to myself, especially when I'm in a group that has different opinions than me. And this correlates with the fact that I am not really a confrontational person. I prefer to avoid it, if at all possible. And yes, I am working on this, but it just shows that these are not just generalizations applied to fish, but to all beautiful creatures. So are lemon sharks generally more social than other shark species?
Yeah, lemon sharks are more social than some other sharks, less social than some other sharks. What I'm mostly interested in is within the shark population, as are some individuals more social and some individuals more loners.
Oh, okay, I see the difference.
And this is what we've actually been able to find and to document, is that, yeah, some sharks are super social and will actively look to be spending time with conspecifics, and others just don't.
Oh, that's sweet. That'd be interesting to know what factors go into it. I mean, I guess it's kind of like for humans too. What factors go into making someone an introvert versus an extrovert? Like, what kind of background experiences can be generally associated with an introvert or an extrovert? And so if you are looking at social individuals, what are they doing together? Are they hunting together? Are they going out to a tiki bar together?
We don't actually know if they hunt together. That's a big unknown. The foraging behavior of those sharks we don't know very much about, but we know that they use refuges together.
Oh, how interesting.
So when the tide gets high, the predators can come closer to the mangroves, and it makes sense for all of those sharks to go and hang out in particular places where the predators can't come.
Right.
And then they'll go and then they'll swim parallel to each other with their little fins almost touching, or right behind each other. It's actually very adorable.
Yeah, that's so cute.
Yeah.
It's like they're holding hands crossing the street.
Absolutely.
That just freaking melts my heart. I just can't even handle that. And so going back to how you measured all this, you put the sharks in a new situation that they had never been in before. But how did you quantify that? How did you quantify their response to being in a novel situation?
Yeah, so we had a bunch of different things that we were looking at, because you actually never know at first what is going to be the personality part. And the personality part is the part that's repeatable. So we looked at a bunch of stuff. So they enter the new place through a door. So there's the door, and then at the other end of the area, there's the very end. And one thing that we thought is maybe some sharks get to the end faster than others. So we quantified this. Then we said maybe some sharks spend proportionally more time towards the door, and others spend proportionally more time towards the unknown. So we quantified that. Then we said maybe some sharks just swim faster in there, and some just like take their time a little more. So we also quantified that.
Okay.
I can't remember what else, but we had, we created a bunch of things in our heads where we're like, okay, what could be something that a shark would do differently if they have different levels of exploration?
Right.
What it ended up being, the one that was successful at quantifying differences between the individuals, was how fast they were exploring.
Oh, really?
Some sharks just get in and they're like, da, 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 and others really like take their time. And this is what we call that rate of movements. And it's not really like a swimming speed. It's more like, it's almost like how thorough they are, how many different areas they go and look at.
Oh, yeah, I see.
And this is what ended up being the good proxy for personality. One way to say it is we divided the entire thing into different areas, and we counted how many areas they were visiting. And the ones that were like going all over the place many times and going there and there again and there and there and there and there, they were the most explorative.
Yeah, okay, I get you now. That's such a fascinating way to look at it. Now, I'm not sure what kind of time you had, but did you do anything with heritable personalities? Like if there was a mama shark that was explorative, if she gave birth, would her pups have a higher chance of being explorative just like her?
Yes, probably. Actually, I do have a number in mind, I think. So we have all of the data for that, because we have all of the family tree of all the sharks. We know who is brother with who and whose mom is who, and etc., which is absolutely incredible. I haven't published anything about it, and I've very briefly looked at it a few years ago. And I found out that it was about heritable to 0.3. So that means that 0.3 part of personality is due to the parents. And another part is due to, the environment, another part due, whatever else. Which is normal. That's usually what's quantified in other animals. So usually there's a part of your personality that's due to your mom through parental effects. Yeah. Like you are a third of what you do can be explained by your genes.
And I was going to say, well, it's in the genes. And I was actually going to be wearing jeans. And I'd point to them, right? No, because you ruined it.
That's nuts. I mean, that's such a big part when you're considering what affects you and what affects your personality. A third is a big chunk of that. And speaking of genetics, are there different subpopulations around Bimini, or is it all one big population of lemon sharks that just kind of intermix?
There's lemon sharks that use different nurseries. So we call them subpopulations because I don't actually know what the, formal definition of a population is, but I'm pretty sure that you're supposed to have some kind of different genetics, actually. And we don't actually know if those different nurseries have different genetics. They might be completely mixed and just happening in different nurseries because why not? Like out of random.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I guess that makes sense that they might have their pups in a nursery, and then when they're old enough and they grow up, they can move out of those nursery habitats and then kind of into the more open ocean, I guess, and then interbreed and intermingle with other, maybe you would call them subpopulations of juveniles, but they're not really genetically distinct. Do you know if the sharks that were born in certain nurseries go back when they're older to reproduce in the same nursery that they were born in?
So they go back to Bimini. Now, whether they go to the exact same spot, we don't know. That's probably something that we could look into in a couple of years. But we still don't have enough data to do that.
Yeah, we'll get there eventually. It just takes time.
Yeah, long term.
Now, do you have a favorite study of yours? Maybe it's a favorite because of the impact that it had, or maybe it was the work that you got to do, like working with certain types of sharks, or how you experimented with them and what you were looking at. Do you have a favorite? Is it hard to choose?
I mean, I think the study that I'm most proud is this one where I looked at the growth and the mortality of sharks, because that's been a very big question in behavioral ecology. And I think I really felt like, being at the spearhead of science and be like, right, you guys have all been doing this and now I've done this and it's time to go forward, That was really a good moment. Also because I've been using data that has been generated by the Shark Lab since 1993.
Holy shit, that's a long time.
Yeah, that's a very long time. I was 3 years old when the first data point that I've been using was generated. So I really feel super proud and super thankful that the Shark Lab has been existing, and volunteers have been coming, and thousands of volunteers have come and have collected little individual data points that I've then pulled together and used to make a big contribution to science. And I feel like all of these people probably have no idea that this just happened, and probably have no idea how valuable that time has been to me. I'm like, yeah, that's a very cool feeling to know that all of those people might not know, but they didn't work in vain. Like, all of this work is being used and is super important.
God, I think I'm almost tearing up. That's honestly like something out of a movie. It's like their sacrifice was not done in vain. It wasn't done for nothing. And you're here showing them the result, showing that they contributed to something really amazing and revolutionary.
Yeah. And in fact, that data set has been used for many other studies that have been really important. So every time those studies come out, I'm like, how cool is that?
I mean, that really is. If I were the person that collected that data point that made it to that paper and led to your finding or something, I would be incredibly proud. I'd kind of be walking around with a little skip in my step, pretending like I had a cane and a top hat. That'd just be so cool. So I hope some of the people that have collected data points, some of the volunteers at the lab, are able to see your research and read about what you've done and how their work, even as just a volunteer, has been able to contribute to your success and then advancing research as well. And so speaking of advancing research, how does analyzing personality of lemon sharks contribute to their conservation or to conservation of sharks as a whole?
It's really not been important at all because we don't know that personality is useful for conservation. We think it is. We know it's like an untapped resource, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know that personality exists. We know it's important and we don't quite know how to use it. And so I guess in the grand scheme of things, me going out there and doing it on a shark species and finding what I'm finding has kind of provided the methodology to do it on other shark species and finally try to answer the question, what can we do so that this tool can be used to better protect the animals or to better understand what threat they're facing, which is one first step into protecting them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, no, I guess there is a contribution there. Is someone had to do the first step. Someone had to open the door. Now the door's open and people can start looking into those questions. But really, my work is super pioneering, so I have no answers to these kind of questions. And I'm very excited that now people are, have it on their radar and more papers are going to come out about that. And hopefully, in 10 years' time, we'll be using personality as a tool to understand ecosystems better.
So Félicie is a modern-day Lewis and Clark, but for personality rather than climbing over mountains. But I guess she is climbing over mountains of her own. Maybe she's just a modern-day Lewis and Clark. Wow. And so there's strong potential for personality to play a key role in conservation. And though it doesn't necessarily play a huge role right now, it may in the future. And that's because we're just now figuring out that animals do have personalities and what those personalities look like for different species. And so then we need to analyze how personality differences affect our conservation of the species. All this to say, Félicie has cracked the door open for a wide variety of new research to come in. So let's go, Gen Z. Put that techno-wizardry to good use and start asking the hard questions. So how does it feel to be a pioneer in the research world of shark personality?
I mean, first off, I'm not the pioneer. The pioneer is this, I'm a pioneer. There's actually a few groups that have been working on that, but we very much are the kind of like the first few cells, and it is cool. It's cool to think that, I don't know, as a researcher, there was a part of me when I was young that was jealous of older researchers before that, in the 90s or even the 80s or the 60s that got to investigate on stuff that I found so cool and so important and the very beginning of animal ecology I'm really passionate about. And it's cool to know that in this day and time, there's still questions that still have pioneers, and that's still going to continue. We know nothing.
I understand nothing.
Oh, for sure. I completely agree. And it's just unbelievable how we've been around for so long, yet there's still so much that's unknown about our world. Mm-hmm. And especially about the ocean, we just know nothing. It's crazy. And it's honestly really encouraging for me as an aspiring marine biologist and scientist. I mean, there's just a lot of questions to be answered.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that we've covered the easy questions, let's get on to the hard ones. What excites you about this world? There's a lot that's really dark and depressing and bleak and, I mean, really just like a rain cloud, honestly, just constantly around us. I know a lot of our day-to-day lives can be shrouded with climate change and a world of other obstacles getting in our way. But what is it that drives you day in and day out to keep doing what you do?
I'm just really happy and really, enthusiastic about the fact that I am and that others around me are still generating knowledge and that this knowledge can be used. I think, and you're talking about climate change. Yeah, I'm aware about climate change and I'm also aware about how bad it is. Yeah, I face that it's pretty freaking bad. But research is still happening. People are still finding cool stuff. And all of this cool stuff is tools that could help mitigate everything. now we just need people to vote and some political things to be happening in order to use this knowledge to its best. But the amount of passionate people that you just meet and that do really important stuff is really cool.
Yeah, and that's what I found doing this podcast, is that a lot of people are really actually optimistic about the future and where we're going. And it's just a lot of people are encouraged by seeing the knowledge that we're gaining, that we're learning, and how we're able to use that. And it seems to counteract that negative bombing that we seem to get through the news, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that's really encouraging to see scientists like yourself be so optimistic and be encouraged about the way the world is moving.
So it's interesting what you say, because I actually kind of disagree with you.
Oh, yeah?
In a way that I feel like the news is not negative enough about the whole climate change thing. And maybe it's a Europe versus US thing. But, you know, like in France, they'll tell you very negative stuff about whatever, wars and stuff. And then climate change will get 20 seconds of antenna about, oh yeah, some glaciers are melting. And then,
oh my gosh.
you know, you never hear about it. I feel like people are not faced with the full, like, how bad it is.
Wow. That's crazy.
And as a scientist who is, as I said, very aware of it, it's sometimes I'm talking to my family. I'm like, how can you not know all these things? How can you not realize how far we are in this process of destroying ourselves? And I feel like the real population is not as aware as they should be. And so that makes me not optimistic. What makes me optimistic is that the younger generation is better and better at getting this information and at fighting for their future. So hopefully these young people are going to kick the old ones in the butt, and then, yeah.
Yeah, you know, that's exactly why I'm here doing this. Here to kick some old wrinkly butt, you know? But yeah, I mean, as I think about it now, a lot of the news is politically based and not so much environmentally based, which has its own effect. But I mean, I know it's negative and depressing. Well, I mean, pretty much all news is, but I mean, environmental news, that just hits on a different level. But as hard as it is to hear, it's important that we hear it.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got to have everybody know how much shit has hit the fan.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and in fact, I'm pretty sure that in France, they have banned commercials that were generating environmental anxiety, climate anxiety.
What?
So, for example, there's this great brand that does electric bikes that comes from the Netherlands, and they made a commercial for their electric bike, and you have people in cars, and they're stuck in traffic, and they're kind of coughing because there's pollution and whatever else. And this commercial cannot be aired in France because it generates climate anxiety. And I'm like, we need to generate climate anxiety this time. Be anxious, people. Do something.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, I for one definitely don't like to be anxious. I mean, I take anxiety medicine for God's sake, but like,
yeah,
you can't just avoid a problem that's only gonna get worse. You need to tackle it straight on, and you need to be aware of it. That's backwards.
and this, like, I mean, don't take my word for it, because that's something that I heard from someone. So I know for a fact that this commercial wasn't aired in France. Whether it's because it's illegal, I don't know, but
that's just nuts. That just ignites a whole different fire in my head. Oh my gosh. You have to be informed. Oh, that's the whole point of this. You have to be informed to make decisions about how you live your life to better help others and our planet. Anyway, so a little more lighthearted here. Do you have any specific future goals within the world of science or marine science or just in your life?
Not really.
Normally, if given a choice between doing something and nothing, I'd choose to do nothing. But I will do something if it helps someone else do nothing. I'd work all night if it meant nothing got done.
Actually, that's not really true. I do have one goal in science. So in terms of like scientific knowledge, I take things as they come and then I just do it, and it's been working out. But one thing that I'm really passionate about and that I love to do is educating the next scientists. So I've really loved having students and teaching them and teaching statistics and helping people develop their own career. And I've been lucky to have a great mentor, and I'm very much looking forward to being this kind of person to others. So hopefully I can teach a lot of people and train a lot of people and help create a little army of scientists.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. Are you able to do any mentoring or teaching in your job now?
Yeah. I have a few students. I've also had students at the Shark Lab, of course. I still have students that I'm helping at the Shark Lab. So yes, I'm very much doing it, and I'm looking forward to the next few decades doing that.
Do you aspire to be a professor or anything?
No. Mm-mm.
No, just a good all-round mentor.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not really like a career goal. It's more like something I enjoy doing, and I think is important.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. No, I think that's a great thing to keep doing just as you go about your own career. Okay, so now a few fun questions. Do you have a favorite animal?
Yes, I'm obsessed with pangolins.
Alright, so I thought this was some weird second cousin of the penguin, but it's not even close. So a pangolin is basically an armadillo and an anteater had a baby. At least that's how I would describe it if I were trying to create it. But it's really just an anteater with scales. I had no idea what it was, so I had to look it up. It's pretty weird looking, and they can curl up into a ball just like an armadillo and roll around, and the scales are for protection, so it's kind of got an outside armor. It's pretty adorable looking, and you can definitely get lost in a rabbit hole of looking through pictures of them because they're so darn cute. Have you ever gotten to see a pangolin in person?
No, never. And I guess, yeah, they're just the animal that I don't know, I love them. They're so cute.
They really are. They're just adorable. What else can you say?
Yeah, they look sorry all the time. Yeah.
And so do you know what animal you would be that best describes your personality? Oh, and this is a perfect question for you since you're a personality scientist, essentially. So you could probably answer it better than anyone.
So and this is not a self-assessment. This is something that a lot of separate people have told me, so I take it as good data. People have often compared me to a squirrel. And I think it's because, well, maybe I'm cute and cuddly, I hope. And then I'm very high energy, and then I love food, so I store food everywhere, and I'm eating all the time, and I'm completely obsessed with food, so I guess squirrel.
You know, now that I think about it, I feel like I could be compared to a squirrel too. At least with the food part, I've got that nailed down pretty well. Well, thank you so much for talking with me. It's been such a pleasure having you on this podcast. And it's great to meet you virtually, but hopefully someday we'll get to meet in person.
Yeah. And if not, you can meet the lemon sharks in Bimini one day, maybe.
Oh, let's hope so. Fingers crossed. That was the funny and intelligent personality sharkspert, Dr. Félicie Dhellemmes. You can find her on Twitter at FeliciedH, and that's spelled FELICIEDH. And you can find her on Instagram at Felicycles, which is spelled FELICYCLES. She also has bios on the Bimini Shark Lab website, biminisharklab.com, and on the Save Our Seas Foundation website, saveourseas.com. You can also simply Google her name and find many of her awesome scientific papers online for free, so be sure to check those out too. You can support this podcast by becoming a Patreon donor at patreon.com/elasmospod to keep this show up and running and fun shark facts a-flowing. Please rate and review this podcast on whatever platform you're listening to it on, and send that rating and review to me at elasmospod@gmail.com to be entered into a drawing, and also share this podcast on social media to get 2 extra entries. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at elasmospod, and on Facebook and YouTube at the Elasmos Podcast, A Shark's Universe. Don't forget to email your marine adventure stories to me at elasmospod@gmail.com so your story can be told on our listeners' episodes. Our website is elasmospod.com, where you can find links to all these wonderful resources, and it was craftily created by Paul McNeely. Our fantastic theme music was created and performed by Connor Blake and Wes McNeely. Wes can be found on Instagram at wes.mcneely1 and on YouTube at Wes McNeely. I can also be found on Instagram at smcneely4335, and now that you've listened through the credits, here's my weekly update. I just recently moved to a new city for a job, not podcasting related, so bleh. But I've been wondering how people make friends in a new place during COVID, because I know this isn't everybody's opinion, but I don't want to get sick, regardless of whether it's COVID or not, but I do like hanging out with people. Anyways, I've had a little difficulty navigating that, and this podcast has been a good distraction for my mental health to keep my mind from spiraling out of control. But if you have any tips or suggestions on how to make friends during COVID, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Anyways, thanks again for listening today, and come back next week for a graceful episode that focuses on the majestic cousins of sharks. I'm really excited for this one, and I hope you are too, so I'll see you back here next week, Elasmites. This is the Elasmos Podcast. Later, skaters.